Welcome to the fourth video in the BIC ALIVE series. We continue to focus on Colossians 1:1-2. We are still in the exegesis mode, exploring the original meaning of the scripture text. We have summarized the high points of the historical meaning, and now we turn to the literary meaning of the text. Ideas are expressed from one person to another by words. Words expressed both in speech and in writing. For words to convey meaning, they must be put together in phrases, clauses, and sentences. This means language as the container of ideas. The language container for all 27 documents of the New Testament is Koine Greek. The Greek conqueror Alexander the Great felt the need in the 4th century BCE to devise a simplified form of his native Greek, now labeled Classical Greek. It was an important part of his Hellenizing, making Greek, of the conquered territories. So he enlisted the help of his old teacher, Aristotle, to produce a common form, Koine, he Koine dialectos, the common dialect, of Greek to be taught to the non-Greeks that he conquered in the eastern Mediterranean region of the ancient world. It caught on, and by the beginning of the Christian era it was the universally spoken language of that world. By Paul's day, many dialectical forms of it existed, but the Mediterranean world could communicate with one another understandably via Koine Greek. With the Pauline mission expanding Christianity into that largely non-Jewish world, Koine Greek became the vehicle of preaching and teaching the gospel to a very diverse community of believers. The originally written expression of the gospel message in the New Testament documents quite naturally is in Koine Greek. To be sure, the writers used Greek as a second language, and not as their mother tongue, which mostly was Aramaic, the language of the Jewish people of this time. This gives the Greek of the New Testament some distinctive flavors.
Now we will move from introductory background to the exegesis of the text from a literary perspective.
The exegesis of the literary aspects of ancient documents includes a variety of actions in the quest for meaning. These aspects can be grouped into two basic categories, somewhat following the internal/external divisions. Externally is the genre, simply because establishment of a pattern of expression depends upon this pattern being repeated in a large number of documents. To be sure, various levels of genre exist, ranging from entire documents that follow an established pattern all the way down to clauses and sentences as the smallest units of genre. We will reference these as they surface inside the particular scripture text under consideration at the moment. In regard to Colossians as an ancient written document, the genre issue here relates to how ancient letters were formulated in comparison to modern letters, and also how an individual document compares to the general pattern. Once a pattern is established through analysis of large numbers of similar documents, then the distinctives of individual documents inside the pattern become clear. Genre determination begins with repeat of patterns of idea expression, but also includes the communication purpose and goal of the pattern. These patterns are intended to communicate to the reader, listener meaning through the use of already familiar forms of expression. Additionally, a literary context is established for understanding the meaning of the text following an established pattern. Quite often this is the most important source of understanding the meaning of words, etc. Without question, Colossians is an ancient letter in form, i.e., genre. The several thousand ancient letters that have been discovered and exist in our time provides a massive database for comparative analysis of patterns and repetition. Four foundational elements characterizes these letters. Prescriptio, the formulaic pre-writing attached on ancient scrolls on the outside of the rolled-up scroll as an identification note indicating who the letter was from and to whom it was addressed. In the later parchment documents in a codex format, this pre-writing was moved to the beginning of the document contained in the codex. The specification of the sender is first and followed by referencing the recipient of the letter. Then a prayer of blessing as his greeting provides transition into the proem.
Here is the prescriptio of Colossians 1:1-2. Paul, line 1, and Timothy, line 2.
Paulos apostolos Christou Jesu dia telematas theou, kai Timotheos ha delphos.
The recipients, line 3, are the Colossians.
Tois in Colossais hagiois, kai pistois adelphois in Christo.
Greetings is a prayer of blessing in line 4.
Haris humin kai reine apatheu patras hemon.
Ashprom, a prayer wish, often tied closely to the greeting section of the prescriptio. Mostly the prayer addressed the family god/goddess of the letter recipient and was an expressed desire for good health, prosperity etc. of the letter recipient. Paul significantly modifies the ancient pattern with a prayer of thanksgiving and sometime also with a prayer of intercession. He also has a more lengthy prayer than in the secular of blessing in a set form as the greeting and the prescriptio. Letter body. Most ancient letters used a single sheet of parchment and were about the length of 3 John, if not shorter. Formal treatises sometimes were casted in a letter format, and would be much longer. The arrangement of the contents is very diverse. Here the creativity of the sender and the topic of presentation would shape the arrangement of ideas. One note, the traditional view of Paul's letters being organized around doctrine followed by practical is only found clearly in Romans, and slightly in Colossians. Mostly the theoretical and the functional perspectives are tied together more closely and in much smaller units of text. Conclusio. This final section is never a conclusion in the modern sense of the term. Instead, the Latin label indicates the final section of a letter. More than anything it functions as a catch-all basket of miscellaneous items before the letter ends. In the Pauline pattern it always contains greetings and a benedictionary prayer. The letter genre in the ancient world was not rigidly fixed outside of these 4 basic structural elements. Much flexibility existed with the details inside these 4 elements. Interestingly, the creativity found in the Apostle Paul's letters became a rather rigid model for letter writing beginning with 1st and 2nd Peter and especially among the Church Fathers for several centuries subsequent to the 1st century. The Pauline letter form was more influential in Christian circles than the Gospel form, along with history in the pattern of Acts and Apocalypse in the pattern of Revelation. These later 3 forms are mostly found among those labeled as heretics after the 1st century. Now let's analyze the 3 elements of the prescriptio from a literary angle. Some very important insights should emerge that provides a solid basis for exegesis and exposition of the text. First, it is clear that verses 1 and 2 form the letter identification formula called the prescriptio. The 3 standard elements are present, sender, recipient, and greeting. This structure fits the standard letter pattern in Paul's time. This genre segment also establishes a contextual setting that is important in defining more precise meanings especially for the expansion elements. Because no sentence pattern is present, it emerges as a formula expression. But each element contains both core references and expansions. These need our careful attention. Senders of the letter. Paul and Timothy are identified as the senders of the letter. Paul, we understand, was the Jewish Pharisee who was converted to Christ outside the Syrian city of Damascus. His calling to serve Christ came with his conversion experience. This experience happened in 33 AD, some 3 years after Christ's ascension to heaven. From the available records, we know that the apostle was executed by the Roman Emperor Nero sometime before 68 AD. Nero himself was banished to exile by the Roman Senate and lost power in 68 AD. Paul's mentioning of being in jail, Colossians 4:7-10, 18, raises an important but unanswerable question of the time and location of his imprisonment. Traditionally, Rome has been the understood location and the time around 60 AD. For a long time I have been persuaded that the better alternative is Caesarea Philippi around 58 AD. This was during the 2-year stretch before his being shipped out to Rome. Luke describes this in Acts 23:23-26:32. This means that 3 of the 4 so-called prison letters are bundled together, Ephesians, cover letter, Colossians and Philemon coming from Caesarea to the province of Asia. Philippians comes from Rome a couple of years later and is destined for the province of Macedonia. One should remember that Paul was the apostle's Greek name. His official Latin name would have been made up with a praenomen, personal name, nomen, clan name, cognomen, family name, and possibly a signem, nickname. It does not show up in either Paul's writings nor in early Christian literature. Most likely as a Roman citizen, his Latin name would have possessed elitist tones rather than humility. His Hebrew name was Saul, Hebsaul, meaning the one requested. As a proper noun, it was spelled different ways in ancient Greek: sigma alpha lambda omicron sigma, sigma alpha omicron lambda omicron sigma, sigma alpha omicron lambda. But it was not used by Paul in writing to largely Gentile churches, since its Greek equivalent solos, equals loose, wanton, suggested the seductive walk of a prostitute or being a devotee of the god Dionysus, Bacchus. Luke in Acts 13:9 stops using it when from Antioch Paul begins his mission to the Gentiles. More appropriately, the Greek name Pi Alpha Lambda Omicron Sigma, Paulos, is used from then on. Paul's associate Timothy is also included as a sender of this letter. He is listed as a co-sender of 6 of the Pauline letters: 1 Thessalonians 1.1, 2 Corinthians 1.1, Philippians 1.1, Philemon 1, 2 Thessalonians 1.1, Colossians 1.1. This Greek name tau iota mu theta epsilon omicron sigma, Timotheos, is a compound noun tau iota mu omicron, honor, and theta epsilon omicron sigma, God. Although the son of a Greek father, his Jewish mother did get acknowledgement of her God incorporated into his name. A native of Lystra, also in the province of Asia, Timothy joined Paul when the apostle and Silas came through there on the second missionary journey around 50 AD, Acts 16.1-3. He would serve with Paul the remainder of Paul's life, to the mid-60s, and well beyond. The main uncertainty here is the particular role that Timothy played in connection to this letter. Listed as a co-sender of the letter clearly signals some special connection. Most likely it affirms Timothy as the writing secretary of Paul and thus as the actual writer of the letter. Given a few glimpses into Timothy's work, for example, 1 Corinthians 4:17, Acts 19:22, he often traveled to the previously established churches to do follow-up service. As a letter sender, he most likely played some role in the composition of the letter, and also as the deliverer of the letter. As such, he and the others, Colossians 4:7-11, traveled from Caesarea to Ephesus with the 3 letters to be read first at Ephesus and then to the house church groups in the Lycus River Valley. Timothy, as a co-author of Philemon and Colossians, would have been especially qualified to read the letters and to answer questions in the subsequent discussion.